You're listening to the Viral Volley podcast. Now here's your host, Rob, on the mic.
Hey, good day, everyone, and welcome to the Viral Volley podcast. We've got our edition of College Volleyball Weekly, our continued conversation from volleyballmag.com. We've got David Kniffin of UC Irvine, Jay Hosack, George Mason, Dan Friend of Lewis, and David Hunt of Pepperdine. We are in week 12 of action here, and we've been doing this since the beginning of the show. It's the COVID scorecard, and in week 10, we had 0 cancellations, and unfortunately, in week 11, we had a total of 4 matches canceled, and a pair of matches in the Conference Carolinas involving North Greenville University. I'm unclear if they're going to be making up those matches. And then in the EIVA Jay's conference, University of Charleston had 2 of their matches canceled against NJIT. And from what I can gather, they're not going to be playing those or making those up. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I saw that on a release on one of the pages. So that's unfortunate. So hopefully things can clean up this week. There'll be no cancellations because there's only so much time to make up matches. And given the nature of how quickly the NCAA tournament's coming, it's not looking likely. But I want to remain an optimist in all this. So with that, I want to do the conference rundown. First of all, Conference Carolinas, we mentioned that North Greenville had canceled matches. They are in second place. Mount Olive is 9-2. So I'm not sure how that's going to be affected if those matches aren't made up. But we'll be watching that conference closely. We're going to go to the MIVA, Dan Friend's conference, home of Lewis University. What's happening in your conference?
Well, I do want to touch base. So COVID scorecard may have got a couple this last week, but you want to remember a year ago, we were all doing this podcast, not playing any volleyball. You know what I mean?
True.
I'm excited where we're at now and all the volleyball that we get to watch, both on the men's and the women's side, just to kind of plug that a little bit. But the MIVA, so I think Loyola got a couple important wins on the road, and we got a couple wins at home. We're both sitting at kind of first and second. There's a little bit of a bottleneck with Ball State and McKendree next. McKendree split with Purdue Fort Wayne on the road, and then you got Ball State coming up this next week where they're headed to McKendree. So those guys, and depending on what happens with us and Loyola, certainly can shake some things out in that top 4 or 5 or so. And depending also what happens, if Ohio State gets 2 wins, it puts them at 9-5. And, if McKendree will lose 2 or Ball State lose 2, so that all shuffles that around a little bit at the same time. And so it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see this weekend. Will make a lot of positional movement for those conference tournament seedings when we get into that. And that starts the next week after that. And we're using our week that we build in for the off week to use for the conference tournament. So we're basically going Saturday. So first round, semis, and finals over the next 3 weeks after this weekend. So
Gotcha. Let's jump over to Dave Hunt of the MPSF and Pepperdine University.
Yeah, so Stanford played 5 matches in 6 days. So that was they were the busiest team of them all. They had 2 at home against UCLA, then they got on the road the next day and then played SC for 3 straight. BYU took care of Concordia, and then we had 3 straight against Grand Canyon, which we squeaked 3 wins out. Our conference tournament is going to be 3 straight days. We're going to Provo, so that's in 2 or 3 weeks. The last weekend of conference play, then there's a bye week to try to keep everyone healthy and give some teams an opportunity to reschedule matches. So I think right now Concordia has some rescheduled matches there. And then I think the top 3 teams are pretty much solidified. I think there can be some ties, but I think it's BYU, UCLA, and Pepperdine in the top 3. And then there's going to be some movement in those bottom 4.
All right. Let's jump over to Jay of the EIVA. I like that. It has a ring to it. And George Mason.
Yeah, the EIVA is coming down to the last couple of weeks of conference play. We are hosting Penn State this weekend, who is leading the charge, followed closely by NJIT and then us. The top 3 spots as of now have been solidified in terms of our, remaining in the top 3. The bottom 3 are kind of in a shuffle a little bit. In fact, I think it's just Charleston and St. Francis that could possibly flip-flop in terms of their seeding. And right now, Sacred Heart is in last place in the conference. The way our conference is working out is the top team of the regular season, which at the moment is Penn State, and looks like that's probably going to be the case the rest of the way. They will host the EIVA tournament of the Final Four. And then there is a first round quarterfinal that is played at the higher seed. So the third and fourth seed will host the fifth and sixth seed. And then the winners of those will go to the host, which we assume is Penn State. And then there'll be the semis. And, Penn State does a great job of hosting these things. We're looking forward to getting after it. It's a big weekend for us. It's our senior night on Saturday. And so I'm playing in the Eagle Bank Arena again this weekend, which is nice. But yeah, I think Charleston, with the COVID issues that came up, they probably will not be able to reschedule those matches. We did not have any weekends free. So unfortunately, nobody's really going to be able to make those matches up unless somebody decides midweek they want to go play them. But I think with that happening, everybody only ended up playing 18 matches total. So it actually worked out mathematically for everybody. So that's a good thing. But yeah, that's what's going on right now in the EIVA.
All right. And Kniff from the Big West and UC Irvine.
Yeah, from the Big West, I mean, Hawaii is clipping along. They're just a machine right now. Santa Barbara's playing real clean volleyball as well. I know some people were curious about that split with Long Beach. But I think the Big West is playing out more or less as expected going into the year, where Hawaii is just kind of continued dominance. Santa Barbara is, in my mind, one of the top teams of the country. It could beat anyone, including Hawaii. And then there could still be some movement because it's a late start to the conference schedule and things could change quite a bit. But the conference tournament will be in Hawaii. That was predetermined. It's been predetermined in the Big West. The way the Big West has run it with 6 teams in the conference is that all teams make the playoff. There's a play into the semifinals. So you've got 4 playing 5 and 3 playing 6. So you are playing for seeding. And the other significant piece is we play 3 days in a row for that conference tournament. So it's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So if you are the 3 through 6 seed, you're looking at playing Thursday night, Friday night, and then Saturday night to win the tournament. So 3 days in a row is a lot of volleyball.
Definitely. With these tournaments coming up, not to look too far ahead, but what unique circumstances, settings, and scenarios do you anticipate seeing given our time in history? And I'll start with you, Dave Hunt.
Yeah, that's a real good question. I'm not sure what we're going to see because this year's brought a lot of change, but I think whatever comes up, our athletes are more prepared now than they were a year ago just to handle the uncertainty. So I know that our athletes are more adaptable at this point, but I'm not sure. I think we'd all just take it day by day.
Yep. How about you, Dan?
It's interesting. I think Dave and both Daves, their formats and their tournaments are like 3 days in a row. And then ours is a total opposite. Like it's 3 weeks. And so I'm just curious. I got to make sure we don't get COVID in 3 weeks, and then injuries at practice or things that come about from such a range of time. And so I think some of those things are the questions that come to mind in terms of that. So on the flip side, if I lose the first round, I guess I could be done way before everybody else.
How about you, Jay?
Our conference is set up similar to Dave's, except it's not 3 days in a row. We actually have the same seating structure, but we have a quarterfinal week in which you can play either Friday or Saturday, depending on what the host team wants. And then the following week is the Final Four, and it's a Thursday, Saturday. So you get a chance to get a day in between and, kind of rest your guys a little bit and prepare for the big battle. And we wanted to have that for the best volleyball that we could, given the time frame that we had. So, that's how we're doing it.
And then Kniff, close it out with what's happened with you.
Yeah, I feel better now than, despite having a losing record here. And I would say this is probably true for the majority of the teams. I think we're in a better spot now than we were when we were at 0-0. We know more about our teams. We've seen kind of how COVID plays out for guys. We know the teams that are out there. And I think it's exciting going into the conference tournament. There's more excitement to play and compete than maybe there was just curiosity if we could even make it through a season when we were 0-0. So I think you're going to see a little bit of that. I think people will still have their best volleyball to play ahead of them. I don't think we've seen everyone's best volleyball with the exception of maybe, Hawaii's been pretty clean. And then the other thing, just jumping off of Dan's comment, it is interesting. This could be, like it was back in 2006 in the MPSF, where And I think, Dan's got a great team, but let's say in a hypothetical, he does lose in that first round. He's got to figure out how to train his team and wait, because he's still a legitimate at-large bid potential. And that's an awkward space to be in when you lose, and then you have a week or two go where you've still got to prepare for the NCAAs. And that hasn't happened for a while just because of the way the conference tournaments have been set up in the past, but it is a possibility this year.
Yeah. Next question I'm going to ask is more from a fan base perspective, but I noticed that the Big West Conference released a statement this week saying that they would leave fan attendance up to the individual institutions or something to that degree. And then they had a link to the statements of the Big West schools, and only probably 3 of the 10 actually had a link. So if you click on it, it says, we're going to leave that up to our administration. So it looks like the buck is being passed, but what is the fan situation going to look for the rest of your matches and your conference tournaments? And we'll start with you, Dave.
Which one?
Oh, sorry, Hunt.
Ooh.
I'd say Kniff. I feel more personal with Kniff.
That's
Yeah,
fair.
there you go. Yeah, for us, I mean, we had fans at BYU a month and a half ago, and I think they're selling tickets already for the MPSF tournament. That was one of the reasons we put it there, was just Utah was a little more relaxed than Southern California. So we'll have fans up in Provo. I don't think the seats right behind the court are going to be sold, but I think all the others, and at least it gives an opportunity for parents to go see their kids where most parents haven't seen their kids play in over a year.
Yeah. How about you, Dan?
Yeah, I think unfortunately it'll be institution by institution, which isn't very good for the MIVA. Because I think the only 2 places that are allowing fans are Ohio State and Ball State. We were able to do senior night last weekend, and I think we're still in conversation with my AD about what we'll be able to do. But Loyola, they're playing at right now, you can't even get fans in there because they're not even playing in the main gym. They're playing in an auxiliary gym. So they end up posting all the way through. I don't think you'll see any fans at all. And McKendree wasn't doing fans of yet. And so it's kind of unfortunate in that sense. And I don't know, maybe we win and we get to host and I can fight that battle, which would be a good battle to have in terms of having some fans. So,
all right. And Kniff, how about you?
Yeah, I think with California, it's going to be tough to see fans at the matches. That's just the reality of it. Even for, we have senior night coming up on Saturday, and there's no hope for having fans or parents even in the facility. But I do think that's one of the reasons we maintain going to Hawaii for the Big West tournament, is that with the protocols in place and, the testing before you even get to the island and the size of the Stan Sheriff Center, there is a possibility and a hope that we would get some kind of fan base in Stan Sheriff. We don't know what that looks like yet. Nothing's been confirmed.
Yeah. And how about you, Jay?
Luckily, Virginia is in a pretty good position, and we're playing our last 2 home matches in the Eagle Bank Arena, which seats 10,000. So we have the ability to put 250 people in the stands. So for senior night, luckily our parents will be able to be there and watch. The challenge, or the bummer, depending on how you look at it, is they won't be able to walk down on the court and take their final pictures together. It's kind of a hodgepodge of, they'll be standing behind you in the stands and you kind of give a little wave like a flat Stanley, but at least they get a chance to watch. And I know not everybody gets that. That's a real bummer. And that's 2 years in a row now that kids are not able to get their families to come down and watch their last match potentially for their school. So I don't know what Penn State's doing. I'm assuming they're going to allow probably 200 or so people in there for the EIVAs. But, Penn State does a pretty good job of testing and keeping everybody safe. I would assume that would be the case still for the EIVA playoffs.
All right. So I actually saw a news article that there's a potential that at least California could be going down to an even lower tier come Wednesday. We're recording, it's Tuesday morning, but there's a possibility it can go down in an orange tier. Does that change things up, at least for Dave Hunt and Kniff, to your knowledge?
And on our head coach's call, they said, don't expect anything. I think pro sports have said April 1, they're going to start allowing fans, or, in Dodger Stadium, you can have limited, but our campus is still closed. So they would have to open up the campus and then allow fans. So that's not happening.
Yep. How about you, Kniff?
I think it's movement, and I think it will trickle to us. I just think it'll be after volleyball season.
Yeah. Yep. Now, how about on your region, or in your regions, Dan and Jay? I mean, I obviously I'm very local to where Kniff and Dave are at, but what's happening in your part of the nation? We'll start with you, Jay.
Things are actually relaxing a little bit. We've got a pretty good handle, I believe, on what's going on COVID wise. The governor has just released some restrictions that on April 1st, they're going to start expanding who can be where and how many people can be in groups in a whole yard. So from that standpoint, we're okay. But I think with Kniff, universities are really not wanting to put themselves at risk, especially when we've gotten through this far and have done so well. And you just don't want to just throw a little gasoline on the fire with only a month or so left of school, and all of a sudden you got to shut down schools because of the issue. So we're okay here from that, but I hope in the fall we're back to normal. That's all I'm hoping.
Yeah, and Dan.
Not much different than what Jay was talking about. I think universities are a little tighter. It's gotten a little looser outside. Chicago's still pretty tight with some stuff, and so the suburbs have gotten a little looser. But you can go to a restaurant or things like that. But I think the university itself is trying to stay pretty tight and kind of keep things like that so they don't have any flare-ups. I think even like our basketball coaches were trying to get some practices in, and they said, no, you're limited to just some individual stuff, and they're really trying to limit them going back and doing any team stuff.
Yeah. All right, let's jump to our next topic. And we touched a little bit of it in our volleyballmag.com piece, but it's NCAA tournament stuff and selection criteria. And I'm going to say this clearly for all our listeners and viewers. The AVCA poll is not one of the criteria, but we're going to talk about it. So don't try and mix it in and blame any of the guys on the screen for this selection criteria debate or controversy. But the AVCA poll was just released yesterday, March 29th. I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on the poll. It's been a challenging year, and there has been a lot of discussion about it. And, it's just been a weird year. You can't, I personally think it's just too hard to follow with the different circumstances affecting different regions. But let's go and start with you, Kniff, as the newcomer to the show.
Nice.
We know Jay will be last. So
because he starts all the controversy. So.
Well, I would say a few things. One is, like I said in the volleyball mag part of this, men's volleyball in terms of selection and seeding has never been in a better position. This will be the first actual year of having 5 people making that decision. 2020 was supposed to be the first year where we had 5 people on the committee. Historically, it had been 3 people on the committee, all administrators, and not necessarily representing all the regions or conferences. This year, we have representation from all 5 conferences. We've got 2 coaches on the committee. So we've got John Costi from Stanford. You got Ryan from King. From the administration side of things, you got David Matlin, who's the AD at Hawaii, which is great, and he's also the men's volleyball liaison of the Big West. So he's following things and his team's doing well. So, he's invested. You got Tim O'Brien, which is the MIVA commissioner, which is great. He actually came through Springfield, right, and played volleyball there as well, didn't he?
He coached at Loyola a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So, there again, you've got a volleyball guy in the room, Lenny Kaplan at NJIT. He's been a while now. He's the chair of the committee, and then you got Ethan Walker kind of overseeing the whole thing with the NCAA. So it's never been in a better spot in terms of decision making, and even just in chatting with a couple of those guys yesterday, they do pay attention to the coaches poll. They're cognizant of it, like anyone would be. But that's right. It's not one of the decision making criteria. So they're not getting down to the end and saying, now how does this weigh in? And I think things like RPI, strength of schedule, even the results versus non-conference opponents, those things aren't going to carry the weight this year, obviously, because RPI and strength of schedule get a little incestuous. But the won-loss results are going to be interesting. And how do you do, like, let's say Pepperdine runs the table and ends up, what would you be? You'd be 13-5, 13-5, so 72%. Where that's your win percentage versus, like, let's say Long Beach finishes 7-3 and they're winning at 70%. Is 72% really that different than 70% when you're thinking about at-large bids? And that's going to be a tough one, because there's nothing the California schools could have done, in terms of the Big West to open at different times. And so those will be some of the challenges, but I do really just sincerely believe the narrative needs to be men's volleyball has never been in a better position with selection.
Good stuff. We'll go we'll save the controversy for last as always, but let's go to Dan Friend.
I mean, on the poll stuff, you saw a little bit of movement warranted for teams that are winning. You know, Pepperdine gets 3 great wins against GCU. They jump us. Congrats, good job, Pepperdine. You know, so anyway, you saw Loyola make a move up. You saw McHenry go down a little bit. You know, so I think there's some movement with some of that stuff in terms of that, and that's all good stuff. We said this before: the teams that are anywhere between 10 and 17, I mean, those teams could, I think, move around at any time. You know what I mean? So the ones receiving votes, ones that are playing, you know, and so, and I think I would say 70-80% of the voters are doing the best job they can in terms of the poll, and it reflects what's going on right now. So outside of that, going to what Dave was talking about, I think he had everything really good. You know what I mean? I think interesting to see the RPI come out and what that looks like a little bit. It was like, oh, Ohio State's really high. Well, you know, in terms of them playing Penn State 4 times, kind of jumped them up. But Ohio State goes to play Quincy this week. That'll drop their strength of schedule down. And so it'll be interesting to see each week what these numbers look like a little bit. And, you know, Long Beach goes to play Hawaii. Long Beach is going to go up on their strength of schedule. You know, there'll be some different parameters with some of that stuff. So
there definitely was a shock and awe created from the release of that RPI, but, you know, again, there's still a few more weeks left here that's going to change that up. Let's jump over to Dave Hunt.
Yeah, it's a family show, so I won't, you know, say anything or use any bad language. But yeah, the incestuous was a good word by Dave. Dave's, yeah,
borderline though. That's PG-17.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, strength of schedule. Like, I mean, we were trying to play the Big West. You know, the MPSF teams were. It makes sense. You know, UCI is closer to us than Grand Canyon is, and BYU. So Santa Barbara Northridge might be the closest team. So. It wasn't for a lack of wanting to get playing. So strength of schedule and RPI is just sort of fixed with what it is. So there's not much we can do there. But echoing again what everyone has said is the committee's in a great position. There's a lot of volleyball people on it, and they'll end up doing the right thing. And ultimately, there's going to be good teams left out. So that's just, I'm glad we got a season in, and at the end of the day, yeah, we'll see what happens.
And then Jay of the EIVA and George Mason and Complaint Magnet.
Complaint magnet? What, have you been talking to my wife recently? All right, so here's my take on this whole thing. I agree 100% with what they're saying about the committee. We are in the best spot historically for this committee to get it right, or at least as close as they possibly can. I'm not so sure that I would really take RPI into consideration this year for me. I'm not saying the committee shouldn't do it, but the RPI, when there's no cross-pollination, you're not really getting a clear indication of who is really good across the country, you know, and listen, the Big West, you look at the teams on the bottom, those are some pretty solid teams, but you look at their win-loss record and all of a sudden you're thinking, well, what's going on here? And the RPI, trying to take all that stuff into consideration. I just think it's a tough pull for them to be able to figure out based upon win-loss record and strength of schedule, because now apparently San Diego is not a very good team to play, according to the RPI, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And then in terms of the polls, you know, Dan's right. 10 through 17, 18, those teams can switch at any given week, depending on what they do. You know, if they go 5 one week or one match and 3 the next, is that considered, you know, not as strong as a team that goes 3-0, even though that team might not be that good? You know, the coaches that are doing the voting, for the most part, we all know what we're doing. We've been doing it for a long time. We kind of know where the real good volleyball is, and we kind of pick the teams that we feel are in the best spots. Still haven't received any money yet from anybody, so I guess apparently nobody wants their team to be ranked any higher, so that's okay. But I think for the bottom line for me is this. It's always fun when you have a discussion with your friends, your colleagues, your coworkers about what team didn't make it and why they got jobbed, and oh, this team should have been in, and why is this team in? They suck, and this team's got a better record. That's all part of the folklore of it all. And, you know, every year somebody's going to say Hawaii got screwed out of something. And every year somebody's going to complain that Long Beach got in over this team, or that, you know, Lewis didn't get the seed they wanted, or Pepperdine got screwed. I love all that stuff. But in the reality of things, the right teams usually go.
Yeah. Well, you know, being that, you know, as teams playing this particular season, everyone's had to adapt, change, make modifications. Do you feel like the selection committee will have to amend whatever their criteria is this year? Because I've seen, I think the criteria on paper maybe once back in 2009 when I had to do some hard calculations, but isn't there like a select checklist of things they have to go through that would have to be modified, particularly for this pandemic season? And anyone can chime in.
I'll jump in on that, Rob. There are 9 criteria pieces. It is public information. You can look it up. It's in the pre-championship manual if you want to jump online and look at it. I think actually the most interesting of the 9, so we kind of hit on a few of them, the RPI, the strength of schedule. You got your won-loss results, which we talked about. How do you value the percentages? You've got your head-to-head, which I think will be the most interesting when you're deciding within a conference once you kind of establish conference strength a little bit. You got your results versus non-conference opponents, which at the moment really only applies to, I think, the MIVA and EIVA, right? Because of the Penn State, Ohio State. Nobody else has played non-conference, is that correct?
Yeah, I think
We did.
We played NJIT and Loyola played NJIT, but that was about it.
Okay. So there's at least a match in there where you could talk about non-conference stuff. The Big West on a technicality is playing non-conference matches because we're only playing a double round robin, but we've been permitted to schedule additional matches. And then interesting there is, we in the Big West, and I'm not sure this was ever made clear, we're permitted to play teams outside the Big West. There's just no one else that can play us. So the MPSF said, sorry, we can't play you, because there's so many protocols within the Big West, the MPSF, and there's such varying levels of how they do testing and everything else. It was easier for the MPSF to just keep it in-house, which makes sense. But if Dan was closer and, we could drive and meet halfway, we technically could play each other. But when things were starting, we could play Dan at Lewis. We just couldn't get on a plane to go play Dan. So, it's one of those things where the non-conference won't be as interesting this year as part of the selection criteria. And then you've got home and away, which is interesting. You've got results against common opponents. You've got results against teams already qualified and under consideration. So as you're looking at how did we fare against Hawaii, for example, becomes interesting because Hawaii is one of those teams we kind of all at this point assume will be in that conversation. The most interesting one is the 9th one, which is the eligibility and availability of student athletes. So here again, we talk about getting to the NCAA. For most of us, there's still a week and a half, 2-week gap between the end of our season and the NCAA tournament. And just watching what was happening with our basketball teams here, who both played in the finals and lost, and we're a one-bid conference at the moment for men's and women's basketball. They were still practicing and going through all the testing protocols to be ready to be the team from our conference if the other teams tested positive. So that'll be one thing that'll be very curious this year.
Oh, good insight. Anyone else have anything to add?
I'm more impressed that Dave just rattled off the 9 criteria, and I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning. So damn, that was pretty good.
I was entranced. I just wanted to listen to that.
Yeah.
Mesmerized.
Nice. He had it up on the screen behind him. Come on.
The teleprompter, right?
No, Kniffin hit it right on the head. I think the most interesting criteria is going to be the health and eligibility of your players, especially with COVID. You just saw a few teams last weekend that weren't able to play matches. We're only a few weeks away from the conference tournament starting, and we're not out of the woods by a long shot. So it's going to be and people are relaxing everywhere. The vaccination stuff is going full steam, but people are starting to relax way too fast in some places. And all of a sudden, you never know what's going to happen. So that to me, I think is the most interesting of the criteria that we use.
Yeah.
I think the thing you might add is criteria we don't know. So do they play travel into it? You know what I mean? When they won't tell you that, but does travel play a dividend? Is there, hey, we'll bring one West Coast team, we're not bringing 2 West. I'm not trying to be the person that says that negatively, but they may look at some of that stuff from a travel standpoint, and they may not look at it at all. And what are some of those other criteria that aren't maybe listed that, hey, they noticed that no teams played out of conference, so they're going to put some more weight on the Big West Conference play for those teams because they think it's a eye test tougher conference. You know what I mean in terms of that. So I think some of that stuff we may not know and may never know in terms of that unless they're divulging the information. But knowing them, they'll be like, no, this is our criteria, and they may have some stuff that's a little under wraps that they're trying to decipher between these little things that are pretty tough. So.
Yeah, and I think what we need to keep in perspective too is just as competitors, we all have a chance to swing our way in to the NCAA tournament. And these at-large bids are a gift. The fact that we have those, the fact that we have a season this year, and I think, again, that needs to be the running narrative is, what we deserve or are entitled to out of this season really is nothing. I mean, it's just a gift that we get to compete. And if you think you should be there, go win your conference tournament. And then after that, be supportive of this conference. I don't know, the selection committee that has a tough job this year.
Yeah. I guess I probably should should the tournament go to 8 this year, but I'm happy to have a season like you're saying, Kniff.
Yeah, I think, that's been, and talking to, Lenny Kaplan's been a champion of this, the NJIT. He's the chair of the committee for selection, but AD or associate AD, I guess, at NJIT. And he's been pressing for 8. And, he believes that men's volleyball is in the best spot it's ever been in for expansion. And I know, we're looking around with the loss of Stanford, or the probable loss of Stanford at this point. And that's scary for people. But at the same time, the sport does continue to grow. 8 is logical. And there are people behind the scenes, including administrators, not just coaches and fans, that are pressing on that. And so, whether that happens in a year or 3 years, COVID obviously slows things down a little bit, but I think it is moving that direction. And again, I think it's on us to keep that narrative moving forward and make sure we're banging that drum.
Yeah, Rob, I got my blood boiling a little bit when I saw some of these women's volleyball coaches, saying, hey, we should be back at 64 teams and look at basketball. And I mean, one, how tone deaf are you that you didn't even have your championship canceled? You just had it delayed, right? Everyone else, basketball had it canceled last year. We had it canceled. You had yours delayed. Heaven forbid, you go to, God. All right. Yeah. Anyway.
Send all the hate mail to this guy.
Marv Dunphy at pepperdine.edu.
Yeah, that was Marv's take. That was Marv's take. That wasn't mine. Yeah.
Just to piggyback on what Dave's talking about, Lenny Kaplan at NGIT, the head AD there, he's done a fantastic job. But I'm going to make not the prediction. It's not a bold prediction, but I'm just saying right now, within the next 3 to 4 years, 2 brand new conferences are going to break off. It's inevitable. They are. I don't want to let any cats out of the bag, but there are literally, there are 2 more conferences within 3 to 4 years that are going to start up. And that's in addition to the HBCUs that are already starting up. So we are going to have, I think, approaching almost 8 conferences, 7 or 8 conferences in the next 3 to 4 years. You're going to have to maybe go to 10. You might have to go to 16. How cool would that be? And one of the favorite lines of Al Skates, he always said, is the biggest mistake men's volleyball ever did was just ask for a Final Four. They should have asked for 8 or 16 when they first had the opportunity, because they never got a chance to get off that until recently. So it's happening. It's moving forward, and the right people are in the right spots.
Yeah, definitely some good news for the future then. Once we get beyond this pandemic. Well, I'd lighten it up now and go to what's become one of our favorite segments now, but it's our user, fan, viewer solicited questions. But the first 2 have been directed at Kniff, so I'm going to hit him up first. And they actually did it through Instagram. So, but I mean, it's for great purposes. It is Women's History Month, so it is appropriate that Kniff gets these questions, especially with the article on his assistant coach, Aaron Johnson, or EJ. Great article over at ucirvinesports.com. No, I'm not homering for all you people who just want to troll me. I'm just saying this is good stuff. So, but the question that came up from Instagram is, why do you, Kniff, think there are so few women coaches in D1 men's and women's volleyball?
Well, I mean, it's, when guys are done playing volleyball, I think sometimes they're trying to figure out what they're doing next. And, I came home to men. I wasn't really sure what my next step was. I went and played professionally in Spain for a couple of years, and, got the call from Sparrow when the position became kind of quote unquote full time. And I was still trying to figure out if I wanted to do more grad school or maybe play a little more or do something totally different, and kind of fell into that position. And, the thing about women's volleyball, there's a lot of places to catch you if you want to get into coaching, and there's just fewer places to catch you if you're in men's volleyball. And that's at the high school, the club, and the collegiate level. So, right away, those spots to kind of come home to are just fewer in the men's game. And so if you're not already kind of going with the men's game as you go through, it's less likely you're coming back to it. So I think that right out of the gate is a big reason.
Right. Well, any other thoughts on you guys? You're seeing so few women in the men's and women's game.
It's a bottleneck, right? I mean, you've got so few programs on the men's side. It's one of the reasons why you see assistant coaches on the men's side stick around for so long. I mean, a lot of these coaches are in their 10th, 15th year. And the reason being is they love coaching, but they're trying to stay on a side that just fits their personality and their coaching style a little bit. So you've seen in recent years a little bit of a jump from the men's side to the women's, and a large portion of that is because the salary differences. You know, a lot of these guys are starting families and they can't afford to raise a family on maybe a men's salary by itself. So they're jumping over to the other side. And you're starting to see some programs on the women's side really excel because of that. And so for that part, it's pretty exciting. But yeah, it's just a bottleneck. You know, we've all been hanging on for so long that, you know, luckily things worked out in our favor to stay on the men's side of the game.
Yep. Anything else, gentlemen? Now we're
I'm going to agree with that. We have Courtney Thompson here as our volunteer. We had Caleb Banworth as our volunteer, and I live with one of the better volleyball players in the country, female volleyball players in the country. So, and they all get jobs that pay a lot more. I'm thinking, hey, you know, can I be your volunteer, or, you know, can I be your assistant? So the opportunities afforded them and the salaries that people are going to pay them is, hey, I don't blame them for going to the women's side and making a lot.
Yep.
My only piece would be just compliment to the women that are knocking down barriers at our coaching. We talk about Nikki, and there's a handful of women in the men's game, and Lindsay at Purdue Fort Wayne, and the assistants at both Kniff and Dave's programs. I think that there's women out there that certainly know the game at an extremely high level. And I think there are young men now that are responding even better to women coaches, which is even better to see. And you've seen it at club, and you've seen it at USA. And there's not even a hesitation now. My wife is a women's coach here, so, you know, I can remember bringing Laura Lee in the beginning of my career here. And, you know, those guys initially, were they listening or not, but they don't even hesitate now. My wife steps in and coaches, they're hanging on every word. You know what I mean? And so maybe the young men are better about seeing that and responding to just quality talent, no matter if it's male or female or anything. So.
Yeah, it's a great quote by EJ in that article. It's just volleyball, right? Like, it goes across both sides. All right, next question. And here we go. If COVID restrictions go into the 2022 season, God forbid, where teams only play teams in the same conference, do you think every conference should start playing around the same time?
We'll first, because then I got to jump off. Yeah, I got to get my COVID test. Speaking of COVID, I'm crossing my fingers. It's not. Certainly, if we all started at the same time, it certainly would be nice in terms of the number of matches. I think pretty difficult to get on the same page with all the conferences, but I could see we could at least try. But I think we're all praying that we can figure out, I get a fall season and train my guys, and I get a regular season where I'm getting to go out to California or make some trips and vice versa. And so I'm going to stay on that positive side and not have to think about the other side until it's next year, November, and you're telling me I have to do it, just in terms of that. So,
all right. Stay positive, test negative, Dan, if you have to jump off.
Thanks, guys.
All right, gentlemen, anything else? Actually, we got to go around to you guys. I got all the perspectives here. So
I'm not even answering that question. That's bad juju. I'm not throwing that out. So,
all right, that's an answer.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I'm with Hunt on that one.
Yeah. My answer is my golf game's getting really good. That's all I'm going to say.
All right, I like it. You just want to stay in the present right now, live in the moment. All right, next question for you. What are the expectations for fans? I kind of mentioned this earlier, but for attending matches this season? And we'll start with you, Dave. Kniffin.
All right. Yeah, I think, something I've been really happy, and Rob, the props to you here, and Charlie Brand, who's been our color commentator as we've kind of gone through. Fans should enjoy the quality streams that are out there, and those streams are getting better. And, it's important to look at some silver linings here where we can, and pick up the wins where we can. And one has just been improved quality of broadcast. And, so I think fans should get behind that. And I love the term you use about passive support, and jumping on and watching some of these. But I wouldn't count on being in person this season, certainly not in California. And if there is if there are fans permitted at Hawaii, I got to believe it'll be limited. So I think fans should be looking at jumping online and watching.
All right, Dave Hunt.
Yeah, I agree with Kniff. They're just enjoy the streaming, be glad that we're at that point. It wasn't that long ago that we were still as coaches trading VHS tapes for film exchange. So things have come a long way in the last, even 5-6 years. And then I'd say outside of California, you have a shot at seeing some live volleyball. And it sounds like at least at the national championship, you might be able to get in and be able to see that in person if you're looking to make the trip to Columbus.
Yeah, people are still looking for that link to buy tickets, apparently. So hopefully it does open up soon, that link. Hint, hint. How about you, Jay?
The coaches below kind of get a little kick out of this. Remember when you had to call your other coaches of the schedule that you were going to play and try to make deals on what teams you were going to be able to send VHS tapes on in a trade so you could get some information before, that's prior to the volumetrics day. But, I agree 100% with Kniff. It's when we played, we were starved for any video of any team playing that was outside of our conference. We never knew. I remember never knowing what Hawaii looked like. I remember never knowing what Princeton looked like or Ohio State for that matter. And the only time that we got a chance to watch them was in the Final Four. If we were lucky, it was on ESPN. And then we only got to see 4 teams. We didn't really get to see anybody else. Kids nowadays are getting these opportunities and you got to get online. Online is where it's at. The big television networks, they're not going to go after men's volleyball, and that's okay. There are so many opportunities online to stream a match. And I know some people complain about paying the $3.99 or the $5.99 a month in order to have access. It's $5.99, people. Like, stop going to
I'm trying to save up money to bribe you. That's the problem. I can't spend it on streams.
It's one less trip to Wendy's, and you get to go over there and watch volleyball for an entire month, and you watch every match of of everybody in that conference. It's worth every penny of it, and that's just the way to go. And he's right. There's great commentators now. How much fun is it to hear everybody talk crap about the 2 guys at BYU? They're doing a great job. Those guys are doing they're homers. It's okay to be homers.
Steve
But
Bell,
they're
Jeremy
doing a
Jordan. There you
fantastic.
go.
Yeah, they're doing a fantastic job. And how cool is it to hear Rom go, taking it to Pound Town? Like, it's every week. It's a standard. I love all that stuff. I think it's a lot of fun.
Excellent stuff. Next question for you. Oh, I know that you guys will like this one, and I think you saw it already, but has there been any talk about capping the number of foreign players on a roster? Although foreign players have always added a great amount of talent to college game and are wonderful to have in the mix, but there seems to be some teams that abuse it and well, we'll just leave it at that point right there. Should there be a cap? We'll start with you, Kniff.
Really getting the lead off here, aren't I? That's an interesting question. I understand the thought process behind that, but I would say that we've got to keep in mind that while this is a volleyball podcast and, obviously we're talking about volleyball, we're not just professional volleyball coaches, and volleyball isn't the only focus of the universities that we work for, and certainly not the states of the public schools that, they work for. And even the NCAA, that's not really their mission. The NCAA does championships and they provide a structure, or maybe a way of thinking about it would be like the NCAA builds a playground and, based on what you can and can't do, you get to invite people in to play. At our institution, we went through a movement here 10 years ago where we really wanted to bolster international students on campus. And that's an important financial piece for institutions, especially public institutions. We've gone through moments where we need to recruit, not just for athletic programs, but for the university as a whole, non-residents, so outside of California, because they pay a higher tuition. And so, keeping teams that are representative of the demographic that the university is trying to recruit or operating within the ethos of the university is super important. So, if you're at a faith-based school, a Pepperdine or a BYU, it's going to be important. Volleyball it's a missionary tool. I mean, it's something that you're using as a ministry within the university itself. So you have to not only live to those standards, but probably recruit within that as well. And for us as a land grant institution in California, who we recruit is so dependent, and who we attract and who the university really wants here is so dependent on what the current mission of the state of California is. And so, I mean, if this was a pro league, and we were trying to protect our national team and developing our young players, that's where you see the foreigner cap in other countries. But here, we're trying to create world citizens. And I don't know that capping that is in the best interest of the mission of the university. Maybe it gives some domestic kids a better opportunity to play, but I don't think that's the goal.
Yeah. How about you, Dave Hunt?
Well, again, Kniff articulated that real well. My simple answer was just no.
Okay, there you go. Jay.
Barton wouldn't have a team. NJIT wouldn't have a team. There are so many schools that thrive on foreign players, and they're good programs. Why would you eliminate the opportunities and Kniff hit on the head? Your university, if they have the ability to be able to bring in foreign students and then send those students off around the world, and they become great ambassadors of the university, all the while curing things like cancer and cleaning up air pollution, a whole nine yards. Really, we're going to try to limit that? So no, why would we limit that?
And it's better volleyball because a lot of those kids are just, they're the better players play, and foreign kids in here, and it's fun to watch.
Yeah.
Yep.
Our next one's a COVID pandemic times question for you. How has recruiting been impacted by COVID? And are you forced to go strictly by those blaring music promo videos that make kids look like they can fly? Kniff.
Yeah. This is a tough one for me because we've really struggled navigating this through COVID, just to be candid about it. I rely so heavily on walking around campus with a kid and his parents and trying to get a real feel, through the face-to-face kind of interpersonal. And so the virtual recruiting is really, truly a challenge, or at least it has been for us. And, we're navigating it like everyone, but I think we can ID talent at a reasonable level through video. I think it's always better live, but I haven't seen anyone play live volleyball except my own team and the teams we've played since, pre-pandemic. And so I think June 1 is when it opens up again. And I think what you'll see coaches bouncing around as much as they can during the summer to try to get more of this kind of in-person. What are the interactions looking like? Would this be a good, coach to player fit? It's tough.
Yeah. Dave Hunt.
Yeah, I agree with Dave. It's been a challenge, but it's a challenge that we're all facing. But I also think at the same time, sometimes we get caught up in this, I got to go out and recruit in Texas. I got to go here. I got to go there. And all of a sudden we realize like, maybe that's not needed. There can be a little bit more balance. And I think we're seeing that in other sports too. You're always trying to keep up with the Joneses. And then you realize like, maybe we don't need to be doing that. Maybe we can, stay at home this weekend with our families. And that's a higher priority, which I think is really healthy. And then it's interesting because you're recruiting sort of looking through, these small tunnels, right? Oh, this kid's really good. Let's try to get him on our team. And all of a sudden, well, now this kid's really good. I didn't know about him. So now do we try to get this? And you're recruiting with this very small lens without really the scope of what's going on nationwide. So that's been the challenge. But yeah, I guess the comfort is that everyone's going through it. So we're all having to navigate it together.
Yep. And then Jay.
First of all, if you're smart, you schedule golf trips on recruiting trips with other coaches so that you keep them away from the kids that you're looking at, so your assistants can get some viewing on them while they can. That's a real trick of the trade.
I have like 3 trips planned with Jay, so now I know.
They both covered a lot. There's a lot to unpack there, but I'll hit 2 other spots. Actually, for us, it's been a little different. We're kind of ahead of the curve, and I'm already looking. My next 2 classes are complete. I'm already on to the next ones, and they're with quality kids that we're pretty happy about. The challenge is that they can't come on visits, and they can't see the school. They can't talk to the coach. They can't talk to the guys, and that's. A lot of teams claim that their guys are their group. It's a big brotherhood, and I think that's pretty fair to say across the board that most of them are. But now you're missing that element, and so now they're making decisions based upon other criteria. What does it really fit academically? Is it really a place that I could live for the next 4 or 5 years? The trick is going to be with the NCAA now relaxing the whole transfer rules. How many kids that committed for the 21 class? And in maybe to the 22 class, it'll be interesting to see how many of those kids maybe thought that was a place that they wanted to go and then transfer out. I bet the numbers are a little higher because you're not getting that in-person feel for the campus itself, for the gym itself, for the surrounding community. So that's going to be, I think, the real interesting statistic in the next couple of years is how many of those kids from this class actually move somewhere else after their first or second year.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to actually modify a question that was asked, but is in regards to graduate student transfers. They asked if who's accepting, but for the most part, would teams accept graduate transfers even just for that 1 year? We'll start with you, Kniff.
Well, it's a no for the Ivy Leagues. We know that, and I would say for UC Irvine, it's kind of it's not really the missional purpose of our campus to recruit grad students to our athletic teams. It can be done, but most of our grad school programs are 1-year programs.
Yep.
Because we're a research school. So really the terminal degree here is a PhD.
Yeah.
So, a little bit to Jay's point, and, it'll be interesting to see, but we have 2 grad students on the team right now, one who's just finished his degree in 3 years and he's getting his master's in his 4th year, and one who's staying his 5th year and getting his master's, but that's rare. So yeah, I don't know that I have a great answer for that. I think it'll really vary institution by institution based on what the purpose of education at those institutions is.
Oh, good to know. Dave Hunt.
Well, I'll have 6 grad students on my team next year. So, yeah, I'll take them all. I'm a big proponent, and Kniff came through the junior college system as well. I'm a big proponent of play as much as you can. And if there's a place to play and you have eligibility, go use it. And that's, if a kid graduates here and wants to go somewhere, I support it, 1,000%. Just, you only have so many years to play. Utilize it, do it. If it's possible to make it work, go do it.
Yep. And then finally, Jay.
Hey, I'm a former JC guy myself. I played at PCC for a couple of years, and later on in my career, coached at Irvine Valley for 4 years, and I'm a huge proponent of that system. Then I agree with both Daves. For us, we have 2 grad students, or actually 3 grad students this year, and I got a kid transferring in next year from Michigan that's a really good kid who's a grad student. I don't care if it's 1 year or 4 years. For me, it's, are you a good fit for the program? Do you mesh well with the guys? Is this a place you really want to be? And if all those boxes are checked, there's no reason why a kid can't come in for 1 year and become part of the family and then go on to do great things. And hopefully we can be a part of that whole transition.
Yep. I don't know. The name of Sean Grubbs comes to mind from back in the day.
Grubber. Oh, I love that kid.
IBC to Pepperdine. I'm sure Kniff, you came across him in Orange County at Newport Harbor, Balboa Bay Club. So, the
Grubber.
Hey, that concludes this week's episode of the Volley podcast. Just to fill you guys in, we're going to have at least the MPSF, EIVA, MIVA, and Big West represented, but the Big West is going to be unique. It's going to be a rotating coach coming in. And next week to meet Alan Knipe of Long Beach State. May have Kniff on again in a rotation. I'm reaching out to the other coaches, but wanted to give him a fair shake, being that this is such a weird season. Just want to get the representation because just felt like I couldn't do it on my own. And you guys know what's going on. And I'm actually following Beach as well. So I'm a little spread thin here. So, but hey, Dave, Kniffin, thanks for coming on. First time, hope to catch you again. And Dave Hunt and Jay Hosack and Dan, who's getting COVID tested. Always great stuff. And I appreciate all the information, comments, input, and just the information you're putting out there for our volleyball fans in this unique season. So best of luck this week. Be sure to follow all their streams. And just like I said, follow them passively just by following your social, going to the websites, making those clicks, commenting, engaging. And I mean, believe me, that does a lot more than you think it's doing. So gentlemen, have an excellent week.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
See ya.
Hey y'all, thanks for listening to today's episode of the Viral Volley podcast. Be sure to follow Rob at Rob on the Mic on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, or at robonthemic.com. Check you next time.